All right, a new feature that we've got, and we want to get your input from the message board. It is time for Smoky Hot Takes as we look back on Tennessee football history, and we'll probably do some other schools as well, but they wouldn't fit well under Smoky Hot Takes. So, Smoky Hot Takes today, as we get off and rolling, is brought to you again by our friends at Craft Treats. Go to crafttreats.com, use the promo code Off the Hook Sports, and promo code Off the Hook gets you 20% off. All right, so Tennessee's biggest almost comeback, because the Celtics almost came back from 3 down to win a series. They did not. Thank you for pointing that out, Caleb. I really appreciate that. That's very nice of you. All right. So, biggest almost comebacks are what?
It's quite a few, and I want to know where you're going to go on this. But
I don't know where I'm going to go on this.
Two that really stand out to me are 2016 Texas A&M. Tennessee, if you guys remember, started off 5-0, had the Dobbs nail boot Hail Mary game. They had come back from 4 double-digit deficits to 3-score deficits against Appalachian State, Virginia Tech, Georgia, and Florida to get to 5-0. They're behind by 2 touchdowns to Texas A&M. They score, cut it to 1, and then Texas A&M has a first down. They can run out the clock, but their running back keeps running, and he fumbles the ball out of the back of the end zone for a touchback. Tennessee goes down to score, tie it up, and loses in overtime. Should have gone for 2 at the end of regulation, but Butch Jones was never smart enough to think that far ahead. So that's an almost comeback. The other one is 2003 Auburn, where Tennessee couldn't stop the run and couldn't run the ball and fell behind 28-7. And Casey Clausen honestly almost single-handedly led them back to win that game, but threw an interception late.
Okay, I'm going to go way back. All right. This is not a huge, monstrous comeback, but I'm pretty sure they were down. How about James Banks in that Georgia game?
Yes.
He played quarterback, and that was the game that cost them Chris Leak. You and I talked about it recently. They weren't down by a tremendous amount, but I just thought that they were not even in the same class as Georgia, given a quarterback issue because Casey Clausen was hurt. And James Banks, to me, kept them in that. They had the ball down about 4 points, I believe, on in Georgia territory, and they ended up stalling there. So, to me, they felt like they were down, and maybe you can pull up the box score as far as how far they were down.
I remember that specifically. You're right. They were down 18-0 in the fourth.
Okay, so they're down 18-0, and they almost pulled that game out. It would have been one of the most painful Georgia losses in the last 25 years during my career, basically. It would have been one of the most unexpected wins in Tennessee football history when you have to go with James Banks running the ball around like a crazy person and really not completing much except for design throws and flat passes, and they just didn't throw down the field a lot. It was an extended running game when they did throw the ball. So that would be the one that they almost pulled off. But it's weird. It was their costliest almost comeback because they almost came back because Banks played so well and CJ Leak went out there first that it cost them Chris Leak and probably threw off their recruiting for the next 3 or 4 years because that was the plan.
Yeah, so, it was a domino.
A huge domino effect, yes. Caleb.
Led to the 05 disaster and at quarterback. No, you're right. That's a good one. That's a really good one. 2000, yeah. So the one I brought up.
Here's the other funny part about that. Would they have been better off just to play, as far as the program, just to play CJ Leak, lose by 20 points, and get Chris Leak as your next quarterback?
Oh, I think so. I mean, particularly when you lost out, unless you were trying to make James Banks happy for his future, and you lost out on James Banks anyway because he wouldn't put the work in.
So, I think you knew you were going to lose out on James Banks eventually. I think that was the one chance for him to have a major impact on Tennessee's football program.
Yeah. Yes, that's probably true. Oh, it's funny. 03 Auburn, the one I brought up, was the year after. Another one. So a couple that stick out to me, Dave. Before my time, but you may remember this. It's not a big comeback in terms of numbers, but 1990 Notre Dame. the year before the Miracle at South Bend, where
I was at that game.
they were, remember Carl Pickens recovers the onside kick. They're driving,
Yes.
and Andy Kelly just throws a late interception.
Yep.
And
Andy should have put some more touch under that ball. And he completed one where he threw a low profile on that very same route, threw a low profile pass early in the first half, and he thought he could repeat it. And if I remember correctly, the Notre Dame safety read that correctly. I was at that game strictly as a fan. My stepdad took me, and I don't think I'll ever be at a football game, a college football game, where there was more talent on the field. Now, that led to the Miracle at South Bend the next year. But if you go back and look at the talent that was on that field, I still remember just a nice little toss sweep to this guy named Rahib Ismail. And he went by the Rocket for a reason. And I remember being in an end zone with like the all 22 cam that coaches look at. And I remember seeing him catch the pitch, Caleb, and me thinking within 2 strides, I don't think they're going to get him to the corner. And they didn't. And he was, boom, fastest man I think I've ever seen on a football field, other than Jamal Lewis running a 40-yard time at his pro day. And he was gone. But if you go back and look, there were probably on that field that day 25 guys that made an all-pro team.
oh, that's funny you say that, because I will never forget somebody I watched an old documentary about the 90s and the Vols in the 90s, and someone narrated that game, and they're like, there were so many scouts at that game that it was probably one of the best games ever for scalpers, because it was probably one of the hardest tickets to come by relative to that time in college football history ever, because so many NFL scouts paid money to get into that game. And so,
yeah, I mean, that would have been an incredible comeback. They did it the next year, and that was very impressive. What was that?
I said more legendary, 31-7 blocked field goal.
Yeah, they do come back. So I'm reading Gene Wojciechowski, and this appeared in the LA Times. So if you look at some of the players, senior step forward and beating Tennessee, Smith's interception near goal line. So the interception was from Rod Smith. I don't remember anything about Rod Smith, but I will throw you a couple of names out there. Chris Zorich, a senior and a captain. He played against Tennessee. This was such a big deal. He was actually injured before. You had Stonebreaker, who was a guy that played a lot. Zorich obviously did. Michael Stonebreaker was the linebacker. So you have Rocket. I mean, and Tennessee had Carl Pickens. Tennessee had Alvin Harper. Tennessee had, I mean, there was the amount of talent on that field was absolutely insane, Caleb.
Yeah, and there was a freshman.
Didn't you have Jerome Bettis?
Yeah, a freshman bus was on that team. A freshman, the bus. Ricky Waters was on that team. Did you name Ricky Waters?
Ricky Waters. I didn't name him. Keep going.
Yeah, but you're right. And then on Tennessee side, you're right. Alvin Harper, Carl Pickens, Anton Davis, Chuck Smith. Just Dale Carter.
Dale Carter.
Yeah, this was a who's who of talent. This is the only thing that would have competed with this was had Tennessee actually gotten over the hump and beaten LSU in 01 and played Miami for the national title that year. That's the only game that would have competed with this one for like raw NFL talent on the field in one game.
Yep, I can go with that. All right, so Mr. Jones says Battle for Bristol was a comeback win versus Virginia Tech.
One, we're not looking at comeback wins, and that wasn't a comeback. Tennessee was down 14-0 in the first quarter, and then they blew them out the rest of the game. That's not really a comeback.
No, it's not. But I see where he's going there.
What about
most legendary almost comebacks in school history?
I think your last game as a fan, you mentioned this to me before, but does this count, or was this just the other team calling off the dogs? 96 Florida.
Oh, my last one was actually 98 Orange Bowl with Peyton's last game. But
okay.
96 Florida, man, you just never felt like that game that they were actually going to come back. Did we?
Well,
did anybody?
Tennessee fell behind 35-0 and lost 35-29. They scored a touchdown with 10 seconds left and almost recovered the onside kick for a shot at a Hail Mary. So I don't know if you really count that as an almost comeback or if you think. I remember Bob Stoops came out because Spurrier had gotten a lot of heat for running up the score around that time. So I think just to stick it to the media, he decided to sit on the lead against Tennessee. And so, I'm with you.
I can't go one that felt like more of a comeback. Sometimes comebacks don't feel like a comeback because you mentioned the LSU one. It felt like Tennessee in 2001. It felt like Tennessee should have led the whole dad blame ball game anyway, because they come out at halftime and they say Rohan Davey and LeBrandon Tofield for LSU are unavailable for the second half. And that's when I immediately start, and Tennessee's up 14-0. So LSU obviously led because they won, but it wouldn't have felt like a comeback to me.
No, I agree. Yeah. No, the LSU comeback, funny enough, an almost comeback was the year before against LSU. I just thought of this. At LSU, when AJ Suggs brought Tennessee back. Remember that one?
Yes.
And then they lost in overtime.
And they lost, and that was Saban's team that lost to Law Monroe. Louisiana
UAB.
Monroe.
UAB.
UAB, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you know what they did to motivate the players? Because they're listen, Alabama football, you got a bunch of homers. Kentucky basketball, you got a bunch of homers in your media. Okay, those are the two. But then there are some that are kind of homers a little bit. And the Baton Rouge Daily Advocate running the picture of UAB the week before, waving their flag on LSU's campus when they upset the Tigers the day of the Tennessee game. Sorry, that was Homer media. Every LSU football player saw that on Saturday morning, that they're still running the old UAB pictures. They were ultra motivated. I saw that in my hotel room. I was like, uh-oh.
So media was trying to motivate LSU, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that was this game that that
it was a paper troll. A paper troll. We didn't have that back then. That was a paper troll.
That was Nick Saban's emergence at LSU. A lot of people questioned the Nick Saban hire, particularly after that UAB loss. The win over Tennessee changed everything. And then the win over Tennessee the next year really changed everything. But, and then I saw on the message boards, another one you were at, Dave, an almost comeback, and would have been the most unlikely one. Mount Cody, 2009, Alabama.
I thought about including that one as well, but it felt like a nip and tuck game.
Well, remember, Alabama had the ball up 12-3 with 2 minutes left. And we thought they were going to run out the clock. And then Mark Ingram had his only fumble of the whole year. And then Tennessee scores a touchdown, gets the onside kick, and gets into field goal range. Just a bunch of things had to happen that you didn't think would happen for Tennessee to have the chance to win the game. And you and I disagree on this, but I still think Kiffin sat on the clock and tried to take the long field goal because he didn't want to shoulder any blame if he called the wrong play trying to get closer.
Well, we don't disagree on the first part. He sat on it too long. Whatever the motivation, good Lord, we could be as clinical psychologists and neither of us would know the answer to that. I hope that person makes good money. Yes.
I saw him do that. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I saw him do that a couple times. Like at Florida that year, I saw him play clock management just so he wouldn't lose by a lot, so he could sell something to recruits.
If they were down 2 scores, then I will say yes, that would be number one. Because even if you beat Notre Dame in 1990, they were never down 2 scores to LSU in either of the games we discussed, were they?
No, they were down way big to LSU. 2000, they were down 31-15, and they got 2 touchdowns and 2 2-point conversions in the fourth quarter with AJ Suggs at quarterback.
But I'll take Alabama at Tuscaloosa that particular year as my number one. I forgot they were down 2 scores. So
yeah, they were down 2 scores.
Smoky hot takes. There you go. Tennessee's biggest almost comeback is. Do we agree, or are we agreeing on this, Caleb?
Alabama 2009. Are we going to go with that one?
I can't tell if your shirt's Miami Vice or more likely, I don't know, the hip LA marijuana dispensary places.
I'm gonna still
You're the Woody Harrelson of the SEC.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to still go with 03 Auburn because that cost Tennessee the SEC East, where they were down 28-7. They scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. Clausen converts a 4th and 13, then draws a late hit, and he's in the red zone, and you're so sure he's going to score a touchdown to win the game. And he throws an interception, his only bad throw of the game.
Smoky Hot Takes. There it is. Be sure and comment below.